Hey, day 254. Welcome. Today's going to be a little bit laid back, and I just want to talk for a little bit. And I want to talk about this book right here. Been tossing this out, throwing out the free PDF and talking about the paperback. And I want to talk a little bit about the book because I really haven't, and a lot of than a quick, hey, just a mention here and there. And first we want to talk about this guy right here on the cover. This is Travis. When you first open this book, there's several testimonials, and these are still from back in the very beginning of Helicopter Only Ground School. But you'll see Travis right in there in the very beginning. He's one of them. And, it doesn't get any more real than this. When people say, is it worth it to become a helicopter pilot? I did a video with Travis, and that's where this picture is clipped from. I flew with Travis down in Tennessee, okay? And he took me up in the Jet Ranger. And I spent a whole entire day with Travis. And what a wonderful young man. And what a neat freaking story. And in the Coffee with Kenny videos, the last 250 some days, I've talked about Travis a couple times. Him calling me up to ask me questions or, asking who I knew in the industry to help out this or help that. And, it's a two-way street. There's another video I talked about when we talk about the connections that we make in this industry. And the connections are pure gold, right? So I wanted to explain exactly more about who Travis is. This young man contacted me back in 2013 when I just had launched ground school in 2012. And I'm actually doing some CFI work, and I would travel around, go wherever and work for people. And I was out in Ohio, way out in No, I was in West Virginia. And I was spending some time down there, and things weren't going real well. And I'm supposed to meet these guys the one day, and they're jacking me around. I'm sitting at a gas station, and Travis calls me up. Hey, Kenny. And he had this southern accent. He's just sweet guy. And we get talking, and he goes, hey, well, I want to sell them DVDs. And he goes, well, I don't have very good internet. Well, we've quit making DVDs since, by the way, and that's only because we make new content all the time, and DVDs go out of, within days, they're outdated, right? Because we always change, and that's the beauty of an online school. So anyway, he, at the time he wanted the DVDs because he didn't have good internet where he was living. And, excuse me, I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go home and burn a set and ship him off to this guy. Because that's how broke I was, And this, I tell these stories a lot only because, I'm happy now and it's part of the story, and I have this wonderful ground school and I connect with people from all over the world, and it's freaking amazing. And just to think back about how that started, and that's one of our most popular videos I have over 700 videos on YouTube now in 10 years. Continually, one of the most popular videos is it worth it? And it's an interview that I did with Travis down in Tennessee after him taking me up in the Smoky Mountains and spending the entire day with Travis. So, that ain't just some fly-by-night picture I scrounged up somewhere. That's a pretty meaningful picture. And Kyle Parrish, who you've seen, some of you, if you're new to this, new to Hogs, you won't know about this, but a couple years ago we met Kyle Parrish down at Heli Expo. And he's like, man, I got my private, but I've been saving up for years to get the rest of the ratings. And how's the guy ever get to start in this industry? And spending, lunch talking to these guys. And I go outside and run into the guys from Sevier County Choppers. And they're like, hey, how we always got guys going through our program? We got nobody. I'm like, you're kidding me. Let me do you a video? Yeah, sure. So I went live on Facebook. And boom, Kyle is chasing me down at Heli Expo. Well, long story short, I hooked him up, gave Kyle the number to Jim at Sevier County Choppers. They made contact right there on the phone. Within a day or two, Kyle was down there checking the place out, make sure it was going to be a good fit, both directions. And now Kyle's flying in New York City. He did it just like Travis. And proof for those of you that want to do it and you want to do it in a short amount of time, here's two guys, Travis right there and Kyle number 2, and they're in our videos and we talk about them and they're for real. So that was Heli Expo 2018 that we met Kyle, And now we're late summer 2019, and Kyle's been through all the ratings, had a couple jobs already, moved around, and now he's flying a Long Ranger in New York City. That's the power of all this. That's just how freaking cool it is. So I wanted to start with that. And then I just wanted to mention, how this all started for me with the Helicopter Land Ground School. 9 years ago when I started this, I never dreamed I was going to publish a book or it be, a best-selling book. Hit #1 bestseller in 12 hours. I launched it at night because I work a lot at night, right? And go to bed tired and wake up the next morning and check the iPad and Amazon #1 bestseller, 12 hours later. It's like, how freaking cool is that? So, this whole Helicopter Land Ground School thing started back, I guess, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 is the planning stages. I'm flying EMS. I own a helicopter. I'm going broke the whole time. And at a certain point, I'm just like, all right, this just isn't working. And start out with my notebook. The notebook I've talked about for years. When I failed my first private pilot check ride, I was devastated, man. 2.5 hour drive home. And I'd had so much time and energy put into that, and to fail hurt. I mean, it hurt really, really bad. And that's a freaking long drive home after failing a check ride. And didn't go back for 6 months. And anyway, again, back to the trials and tribulations we go through and how later on, if put your nose to the grindstone and work hard and be the best you can be, and eventually it's going to work out for you. If you try hard enough and you work hard enough, it is going to work out. So always knowing that there was a lack of training out there for helicopter guys, and girls, and there's plenty for fixed wing, always has been. But helicopters was just like the black sheep of aviation, right? And there was just nothing out there. And because I struggled and then was out there in the world, and I observed firsthand how there are flight schools that have great ground school programs, but there are so many that don't. And there's so much garbage that goes on, and places that don't push the ground and just want you to be flying. And it's really a sad state of affairs, but, it is what it is, and it's the reality. So I knew all those years, God, somebody needs to start something for helicopters, right? And I was flying EMS, and Nick Logan, another great part of the story, inspired me to start blogging and doing videos. When I was flying EMS, so I'm flying EMS, and I've got a helicopter on the side, and I'm trying to make a go of it, right? But, you work full time, try to run a business part time, and you can't put all your focus like you should in either job, maybe, And Nick Logan was an internet marketer, and he's like, hey, you should start blogging and doing videos to promote your helicopter school. And so that's where this all started for me. This borrowed video camera, started making videos 10 years ago now, 11 years ago, to promote my helicopter company. And wasn't long before Nick Logan put the idea in my head where he's like, you know what, you gotta start an online ground school. And so I took kind of what I learned with the audio and video, and even though my helicopter company was not successful, I tried, and I worked really hard, and I marketed really heavy. So even though my business was going down the tubes, I was getting a lot of attention, and I was getting a lot of phone calls, but getting people to come to the Midwest to fly an Instrom, that's a hard sell, right? There's cheaper helicopters in nicer places of the country where the weather's better. And anyway, I ran that into the ground, and in the end, I'm thinking, I still owned the helicopter, and I still had the helicopter company as I launched Helicopter Online Ground School, and realized pretty quickly that, I'm making money from my online sales, but this helicopter business is even taking what I'm learning from selling my knowledge online. Pretty devastating, right? So I took this notebook that I had, back up to the failure I had. I created my own notebook because, back to the story of there wasn't anything out there for helicopters. So after my failure, I went down to the local drugstore and I bought a great big thick notebook. And I went home and I started writing down notes. And I understand now how important this is. The repetition of reading something, writing it down. I had a whole bunch of different pads. And I had notes from this flight school and notes from that flight school. And, you know, they were kind of scattered everywhere. And I had all these flipping books, right, everywhere. So being overwhelmed after failing and not knowing where to go and not really having any kind of guidance through all this stuff. You know, instructors for me were a couple hours away, so it's a lot of driving just to go do ground school. And again, young instructors, a lot of times they don't want to do ground, right? So I create this notebook. And I realize now how I could, you know, my notebook was over here still in one of the tubs. We're still unpacking from our big move. But anyway, I can visualize those pages of my notebook right now, sitting here. And I haven't opened it in a couple years. But because I hand wrote the notes out to make sense to me, and I really did start in that notebook with all the things that I really struggled to remember and things that I knew I had to memorize. Because after the failure, the examiner said to me, he's like, it was an FAA examiner, right? And he's like, you have to understand the concepts and you have to know them so well that when I'm sitting here at the table, you can't hesitate. You know, when I ask you if the engine which way the nose is going to go, you got to know. If I ask you about selling with power, you got to know the three things that get you into it, and you have to rattle them off. You can't spit and sputter and sit there and think about these things. So anyway, in the notebook, I just spent all this time organizing and writing and then even maybe rewriting, right? And making it just maybe not neat to the average Joe, but neat in my eyes and a flow that made sense to me. And then that was what I would study. And I'd still reference my other materials, that all of us have to have certain materials that are required to be a safe and prudent pilot. And to take a check ride, there's a lot of different books that you have to have, right? But I was using the notebook as my main study guide. Sit down and just flip this thing page to page. So back to the check ride book. In the beginning of this, I thank my sister. My sister, who was off work at the time, I think she was rehabilitating from a surgery that she had. I didn't know nothing about building PowerPoints. I didn't know nothing about computers. I didn't know nothing. And my sister takes this notebook and transcribes it. And I launched that thing on Amazon, and it didn't take long for me to take it down because people started, hammered on it right away. Doesn't matter. I took that notebook, and that's how I started Helicopter Airline Ground School back in 2011 when I started building presentations. I was building them from the notebook. And my sister built PowerPoints for me from the notebook. So I just really called it helicopter check ride preparation in the beginning. Because I wasn't teaching a full course of training. I was teaching my notebook and just going through all the stuff in the order that made sense to me. And, I gained momentum in the beginning and people were buying it, using it, but they were quite often saying, well, hey, it'd be nice if it was organized into sections a little bit better. And over the years it's totally changed, right? It's now a full-fledged Helicopter Airline Ground School for all courses. So anyway, my sister, I have to mention her because she's the one that helped me get it all started, right? And a lot of the computers that I used in the beginning, a lot of the equipment, so much help from my sister getting this thing off the ground. And, a few other people I mentioned here in the beginning, David Latimer, and I got to mention this about the beginning of the book. Dave Latimer is another reason, the reason I started flying helicopters. As a young boy growing up, I was fascinated by helicopters. I knew that I had an interest in law enforcement. And this David Latimer, he operated the Plymouth Municipal Airport. But anyway, that was in his retirement job. He was originally a state trooper, flew helicopters for the state police. So as a child, I looked up to this man. State trooper, flies a helicopter for Indiana State Police. How freaking cool is that? And I did become a police officer. And then years later, my first helicopter lesson came from David Latimer, who had relayed a phone number and a place to go try it down in Indianapolis. So I knew him as a police officer, as a young kid. Then when I became a cop, I was a cop while he was still a state trooper. So I actually, attended some meetings and different things with him. And then years later, he winds up the manager at this airport that I was at. And Dave Latimer was a huge inspiration in helicopter landing ground school, supporting me when times were tough. He paid my rent. I was getting so far behind on the rent for the helicopter in my offices, and the city was on him, right? Because he's the airport manager. So I owed, 2 or 3 months rent. And I had this Sig Sauer 9mm that was my duty weapon. It was what I carried as a police officer. I had the opportunity to buy that weapon because they did that. You were able to purchase your own weapon that you carried as a police officer. So for all people are going to get freaked out over handguns, this was my handgun that I used as a law enforcement officer, okay? So it's totally legal for us to buy those weapons. Well, I had this gun. I really liked the Sig, man. It was an awesome freaking gun. I sold it to a buddy so I could go pay my rent. I go down to the city and walk in, and they're like, "Oh, your rent's already paid." And I'm like, "What?" And they go, "Oh, yeah, Dave, the airport manager was in just earlier today, and he paid your rent." And I'm like, oh, my God. So that's who David Latimer is at the front of the book. And, of course, there's lots of other acknowledgments of people that I thanked along the way, but I got to mention those right off the bat. And then my daughter, who many of you know, I state right here, my daughter, Gloria Jean Keller, for putting up with her dad, working like a dog during the hard times and never once complaining. She told me, "Dad, you're working hard because that's what you have to do, and it's okay." And she was like 8 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old. I mean, this little kid, and I was always working, right? She was with me a lot, but she was with me at the airport, and she'd be there hours and hours and hours when she didn't want to be there, but that's what I was doing, was working on helicopter landing ground school. And then we'd be home, and I was living in a beat-up old trailer because I was so broke because I owned a helicopter. And anyway, so many people inspired me over the years, right? And we all need that. We all need those people that stand behind us and help move us forward in those times of need. But I'm telling you, I've been kicked to the curb as many times as anybody else out there, and you just keep getting up and you pull up your bootstraps and you just keep on going every single day. And then the other thing I want to talk about real quick before it goes into the book, and maybe I'll make that a video for another day. I mentioned my parents in here, right? And I just want to talk about this because I wish they would have known that I ended up, well, my mom has no idea because I lost her from Lou Gehrig's disease back in 1990. And as a very young man, that shaped my life. And it was very difficult and it was very hard. And I was in my early 20s when she died. The prognosis was 5 years, and that's about how long it lasted. So I was, not even 20 years old yet when she contracted this disease. And we kept her home for the 5 years that she was sick. And I left in '89 to go to the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And I'd come home every weekend, and that really sucked. And that was really hard to be gone. But I knew my mom was proud of me for becoming a police officer. But she has no idea of the helicopter and everything that has preceded. I know I was very motivated by my mom and had to thank her, of course. And then I talk about my dad. And my dad was still alive. I lost him about 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now. And he wasn't very supportive of the helicopter training when I first started out. And I want to tell this part of the story. He just like, I just hope it's going to be as profitable as you think it's going to be. And I'm like, oh no, Dad, I'm going to be a helicopter pilot, make all kinds of money. Okay. We know now that's not the case, right? We know now you want to be a helicopter pilot. You got to do this for the love of it because you have the passion. It's in your heart. If you're doing it because you think you're going to make a lot of money, then you might as well give up now. becoming a helicopter pilot has to be a complete, entire commitment. And you got to do it because you love it. And when you start getting a paycheck, you got to be happy whatever that paycheck is. You can make some okay money, and in some instances make some really good money, but that's only going to be after the years of hard work of getting your training. In the beginning, making peanuts, eating ramen noodles, and we all joke about it, driving a POS. And it's really the life starting out as a helicopter pilot. But I wrote in here I can remember talking to one of my buddies, Steve, and I was talking about my dad at the time. This is way back, just as I was learning to fly, right? Never knew I was going to go anywhere with it. And my dad had got some big award because he was a high school official for many years, and he was a school teacher for 40 years. And I was really proud of my dad, and they named the baseball field after him. We got his sign we're going to hang up here in the Hugs hangar. It's over there by the wall. And I remember telling my buddy that, I was really proud of my dad being in the paper. And I was like, man, I'll never do anything cool like my dad did. And I can remember my buddy Steve saying, yes, you will. And I was like, yeah, right. I'll never compare to my dad. I'll never do anything cool like that. And by the way, about that same time, Steve and I was having this conversation. We're talking about the helicopter thing because I was just a student. Or maybe I just got the private. I think I was just a student. And I said, one of these days I'll land my helicopter over at your house, Steve, because I knew you had this great big long yard, almost like a little mini runway. And he went, yeah, right, like that'll ever happen. And I'm like, oh, you son of a bitch. I'm gonna do it now. Well, a year or two later, or maybe even longer, one day I showed up at my buddy Steve's house. Surprised him. He had no idea I was coming. And he was home with his son, and I took him and his son up for a ride from his yard up around the local area, right over by where I'm living now today. And, none of those times where somebody tells you can't do something. And even though he was motivational, he also just kind of jokingly, yeah, like that'll ever happen. So, and then back to my dad in the Ken Keller Field, he did support me. After, he wasn't convinced in the beginning, but as he saw how hard I worked for it, and then continued on retesting after the failure of the private and then going for commercial, at a certain point, my dad changed his tune and got on board with it. And my dad actually helped me with some money along the way. We all go through these struggles and headache and heartache, and we sell stuff, spend our savings, borrow money from a rich uncle. Whatever you got to do, somehow you find a way to get the money. And my dad did help me, did get to see me fly, and I got to land at Ken Keller Field with my dad. One of my first jobs, the company I was working for let me take the helicopter home for Father's Day. And we made, my family knew I was coming, my sisters knew I was coming, and I made sure my dad was going to be there, of course, and he was, elderly at the time. But I was coming and bringing the helicopter, and like, hey, don't let him know. Don't have any, don't let him know that I'm coming. So, and we cleared it with the school, that we could land at the school, cleared it with the superintendent, because you always want to check with where you're going to be landing, right? And landed at my dad's house on Father's Day. Surprised him. I remember him coming out and just, his mouth hanging open. And I'm like, come on, get in. We're going over to the Lancer baseball field. So we went over and landed at Ken Keller Field, and family came over, and we actually gave rides out of Ken Keller Field with my dad. And, important part of the story because, again, for all of us, we need those people that support us in our lives. And my dad wasn't a fan of the helicopter pilot idea in the beginning, but he did jump on the bandwagon later on. And he helped me with the helicopter business. And man, I hate to say this, he helped me with money to keep that thing going. And it's a shame because it's like, anyway, I could have called it up before I did, but he wanted to help me. And, at that time, he was like, well, you didn't go to college. And at that time, I couldn't afford to help you. And now I can. But, I said, I never accomplished this dream without his help. So one more thing before I go, I want to talk about, the Lou Gehrig's disease thing, and I don't think I've talked about this a lot. I've mentioned it a few times over the years, but that really did change my whole entire life, and it's the reason, one of the reasons I'm flying helicopters today. As a young kid, I thought I was too stupid, didn't have the money, wasn't smart enough, wasn't good at math. I had a million reasons why I would never become a helicopter pilot, even though it was a dream of mine. And that battling, or my mom battling that Lou Gehrig's disease was, freaking horrible. It was a nightmare. And the only good news was, because I was a law enforcement officer from a very small town in Indiana, I could go to my mom and dad's when I was on duty, right? Because small town, I could stop in there anytime. I mean, that's pretty typical, nothing going on. You stop home to eat, you stop at a friend, you stop at the local coffee shop to have coffee, whatever. So the rest of my family all had jobs where they had to be gone 8 hours a day or whatever. I was the main caregiver because on my time off, I would be there at a camper right in the side yard beside the house, so I'd always be close. And then when I was on duty, if she needed me, I could stop home. And I could stop home and help, get her pills or get her something to eat or help her get to the bathroom. And, it was a big strain on my life. And I hate to say the word strain because I'm to this day, I can't, how do I want to say it? I'll never regret being there for my mom. I'll just never regret it. And it took a toll on our family. And I was a full-time police officer, and she passed away, like I said, in my early 20s. So long before the helicopter thing was when my mom passed away. So she has no idea, never got to see the helicopter pilot thing. But where am I trying to go with this? Oh, so the helicopter dream stemmed from my mother's death. I was the youngest of the family, had 4 older sisters. In between my sisters, everybody taking their turns at trying to help take care of my mom and my dad as well. And he was still a school teacher at the time. I was the main caregiver, right? So I was the strong one. I'm the baby of the family. Everybody else is falling apart. My dad's falling apart. My sisters are falling apart. Everybody's falling apart. My oldest sister, the one that helped me with the business, she's a nurse, so she was like, we'll say the main caregiver as far as actual care, and did what she could, but she still had a full-time nursing job, right? So what I'm getting at is I was the one that was always there. And because I guess I felt like I was being strong for the whole entire family, I was strong through the whole thing where everybody else was falling apart. Well, along this route, I also created a wrecker service in there too. And I was doing that on the side, and I had people working for me. But anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, so I have a lot of things going on, right? And after my mom passes away, my life kind of falls apart, right? I had, at a very young age, in my early 20s, I owned a whole bunch of trucks from my towing service, and I had some nice property, and I'd become a police officer, and I had all these things, and I had these material possessions. So I had to restart the camera there. Yeah, my whole entire life had fallen apart. Anyway, what happens next is I go through depression, right? Because I was the strong one through my mother's sickness, and the one kind of holding the whole family together. They had already started grieving, I guess, the previous 5 years. I hadn't. So here I am in my mid to late 20s. Had lost my mom, and then I realized that material possessions meant nothing. This was the first time that, I guess I didn't lose I didn't lose everything this first time around. But what I'm getting at is, when you get depressed and you go through something like that, I had 18 vehicles total between the trucks and Corvettes and Oldsmobiles and Jeeps and all the cool stuff that I had. But when all of a sudden you lose one of your parents and you lose your significant other, and you just all of a sudden find yourself against a wall, realizing that, material possessions mean nothing when you're not happy, when you go through depression. And so to make the story go back up the other direction, I actually reached out for help. I did. I actually reached out for help because I needed it, right? And at one point, I don't know whether you'd call it suicidal or not, but you get to a point where you're really wondering if you even want to continue on, right? And so I started going to counseling. And turns out counseling was the best freaking thing I ever did in my entire adult life. And going and asking for help is the hardest thing, right? Getting started is the hardest thing. And you can take this and apply this to anything in your life. Getting started is the hardest thing. So I started going to counseling, and I'd go a couple times a week, and as things got better, I would just move it down to one day a week and would go on Fridays. And it was like my favorite day of the week, right? It just helped me so much to talk to someone, and that's all what counseling was. It was just me going in and talking, basically, and occasionally him telling some short story that I'd think about driving away, going, what's he trying to tell me? And then the drive home, 20 minutes later, I go, aha, okay, I get it now. I get what he's trying to tell me. And I can remember they were 1-hour sessions. And one day, partway through, things go up and down, right? But one day I was having a bad day, and I went on for like 2 hours. And when I got done, he said, are you done? And I'm like, yep. And he goes, well, that's 2 hours of a 1-hour session. And I'm like, yep. And before I say what he said to me, you got to remember, I had a lot of respect for this guy, right? He goes, well, sounds to me from the last 2 hours that Kenny blames everybody else in his life about his problems but himself. And I was like, oh, shocked. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? Well, I can tell you later, right? He was 100% right, and I got it. And it took me, whether it was 10 minutes or half an hour or a day later, I'm driving down the road and went, bam, it hit you, like a V8. He's right. I was blaming everybody in my entire life for every single problem that I ever had. And it's those small little things like that you learn, and a lot of those things I learned through counseling is what helped me then move on with the rest of my life. And I'm proud to say that I started listening to motivational tapes and self-help gurus, and it did me a lot of good, right? Along with the counseling, doing the self-help tapes, and the one day he's like, okay, you got your little workbook there. He goes, I want you to shut the tape off, and when you do, I want you to write down 10 things in your notebook that are dreams of yours that you think you'll never, ever do. Unreachable things. And he goes, I don't mean stuff that you think you can do. 10 things, take as long as you need, but think about 10 things that you really want to do is a dream that you think is unreachable. Okay, shut the tape off. I'll fill out the 10 things, and one of those things is learning to fly helicopters. Just didn't think I could do it. And turn the tape back on. He's like, okay, today go out and make a move towards one of those things on that 10 list. Whether you buy a book, you make a phone call, you look up an ad, do something. Make one tiny little effort towards one of those goals today. And I went out and drove half an hour away to the nearest town, to a town that had a magazine shop, because I was from this tiny town, and bought an aviation magazine. Got home, all excited, opened it up. Guess what? Not a damn thing in it about helicopters. The whole frickin' book was fixed wing. Nothing against fixed wing, but you get where I'm going here. So, all these years later, here I am doing it. Helicopter Land Ground School is what I started, and I help people all over the world. That's the beginning of the book, and that's the things that I touch on. And for a long time, I've been wanting to sit down and talk a little more about the book. Those are only a few short pages, but in a video, I can sit here and I can talk a little longer, right? And I can go a little longer, and some of these things I talked about today is things I've talked about, and maybe a few of them I haven't. But it's all stuff that I wanted to get off my chest, because now you have a little insight behind why I try to motivate you, our followers, our viewers, our ground school members. It's because of the headache and the heartache and all the things I've learned. And it takes all of our life's ups and downs to get to where we are today, right? And this is now, Helicopter Land Ground School is it's my whole entire life of work. Everything I think ties into becoming an instructor and the failure of the helicopter flight school and then the start in the online ground school. And I did this in 2014. Started ground school in 2012. I had no idea. But I was watching some, I learned from some great people, some incredible people I learned from. One more thing I got to say. I had the pleasure to work with someone who worked for this guru that I talked about, who I learned from. She worked for him for 20 years, and then some of the things that I do today with audio and video and marketing and books and all the different things, I learned from this woman. And it was a pleasure to meet her because she had worked for many years for the guru who helped me all those many, many years ago with the self-help tapes and helped me move my life on, and very proud of that fact. And I've got to meet a lot of the people that I've worked with, and I've learned from really good people. But probably the biggest thing I learned is just to be myself and just do what I do and put it out there. And you do a good job for people and you do your best, and things will work out. It's easy to blame others. It's easier to find all the reasons why you can't do it. But hopefully that gives you some insight to why I push everybody so hard, why I try to motivate you along with all the helicopter training stories. There's the real meat of how I got started. And I could go on longer, but the video card already filled up once. So I'm going to call it off there. And maybe we'll come back and hit chapter 1 for tomorrow. But I wanted to get that. I wanted to talk about that. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I'm going to put the PDF down below, the link for the PDF. It's free. You sign up, boom, you download the PDF, boom, you got it. So you can go ahead and check this dude out. You can check out the PDF right there below in the description box. And I'll also put the link to actually buy the paperback book. Sorry, you're not buying the book. We have stacks of them upstairs. We buy these books in bulk. I've done paid for the book. We charge $7 to package it up, take it to the post office, and ship it off to you. $7 shipping and handling, I'll send you the book. We've been doing that for quite some time. I still enjoy doing it. It's not a money maker. It's just a way to spread this piece of knowledge. And don't be fooled, Helicopter Check Ride. It's got training tips in here. It's got mistakes I've made. It's got all kinds of stuff. It's got the helicopter threes. I talk about the number 3 so much, how much I love it. Do you know there's a whole chapter called the helicopter threes? There's a whole series of things that you got to know and learn to become a helicopter pilot, and they come in threes and threes and threes and threes, which like police calls, fire calls, wrecker calls, all those things I did in my previous lives, they always come in threes, right? So anyway, I'll put the link down below for that as well. If you want the paperback, we'll ship it to you for $7 shipping and handling. That link will be down below as well. So those that you've been tuning in, this is the back side of what you haven't been seeing. You've been seeing our presenting wall with the Hogs wall. This is another wall that we've been putting together. A new truss system up above. These are the cameras right here, here, and here that are always pointing that way. Did a flippy dude today because we're still building, organizing over here. Last week we had a server crash. Oh my God, that was scary. Luckily the backup was saved. So we got a new server coming. That won't be here for a week. Luckily the guy was able to save all of our data. So, thank God, that's 10 years of my life that I was worried that may be gone. And so I told Heather, well, until I get our server back up, we're going to organize and finish getting the rest of everything unloaded, organized. We're still working on the wiring and setting things up here, but this studio is frickin' rocking. It is badass. Everything's mobile. I keep moving things around. I'm putting wheels on everything. So no matter what it is, I can configure this thing and change it at any time I want. And with the space and the technology and our new server, fiber internet coming, can't wait. That should be here in November. And I promise, live events. As soon as that fiber's installed, man, a lot of these Coffee with Kennys, we're just going to shoot them live. And that way it'd be easier for people to get in and interact with us and ask questions live while we're there, which you can do now almost every day in chat, but these will be for real live sessions. All right, better wrap it up. Go down below for Helicopter Check Ride, the free PDF. It's in the description box. You can download that dude right away. If you like the paperback, $7 shipping and handling. Got to thank each and every one of you that follows our videos, makes comments, gives us likes, subscribes, our members. You know about the members. We show them off all the time, and we're going to continue to show them off because they're plastered all over the wall, and they keep coming in. They just keep coming in. All right. Can't believe I made it with only one little boo-boo. All right. Day 254. Peace out.
Oh, yeah.
Subscribe. Click the bell.
Oh, yeah.